Tarek, Sultan, Alessa, we had a fantastic conversation yesterday where you were telling me about some of the technology that Agility, your company, is actually looking at in terms of working with small and medium enterprises, something that's not happened. You are the only one on this panel who's not a policymaker per se. You approach this panel from as a business leader. Is it your sense that, it's all very well to talk at a macro level about China and the United States and emerging economies, but at the lower level, there is plenty of opportunity, despite these concerns, of doing business?
I think that's absolutely correct. If you look at this issue of China and the U.S., for example, I think both of those countries, China is still growing at 6.5%. The U.S. grew at 4%, I think, the last quarter. So, I mean, obviously, their economies are still growing and very healthy. But I think we need to look at this from the context of SMEs and look at it from the perspective of what we know today. And it's very clear if you look at the emerging markets, the growth rates, the growth profile there is superior than the developed markets, perhaps double. But I think we need to, the big problem with this dispute is we're not focusing on what's, I think, important to actually address growth, and that is focusing on the things that matter to SMEs. And in particular, we need to look at what's holding SMEs back, and that's basically we need to take the measures in our economies that simplify and facilitate the business environment so SMEs can be more participative in the global economy.
Yeah. You were also telling me that in terms of your own industry, your own company, when you come across what a lot of people would say is an exaggeration, that the emerging economies are suffering, we don't know what's going to happen next. Your answer to that is you look at it from a 10, 15-year perspective. In fact, perhaps even a 20-year perspective, that you will ride out the storm. There may not be a fundamental change in the order that we now see, and therefore there is plenty of business to be done.
That's for sure. If you're a bank or a financial institution and you're looking at these I would say, trade fluctuations, you can maybe do things that can change a decision on a dime. But if you're investing in warehousing and infrastructure on the ground to enable, and technology to enable SMEs, those are decisions that you're making for a 10, 20-year investment horizon. And I think if you look at the facts, you look at the growth profiles, there's some challenges in the emerging markets for sure, but if you pick wisely, and even, I mean, we know, for example, Turkey has had some issues, but if you look at the balance of all emerging markets and you look at it from a portfolio perspective, you're still getting superior growth return and profile for your investors and also for SMEs.
Yeah. PricewaterhouseCoopers report about prediction what's going to happen in 2050 puts India as the second biggest economy in the world after China, ahead of United States. Talking about these inequalities and everything else that's going around us with Oxfam reports and everything else, how do you, in your position, ensure or assure that there'll be, by then, it'll be more equitable distribution of wealth in that country? Because today we have 35 or 45 families own substantial amount of the billionaires in the country today of the wealth of India. How do you assure that's going to be not the case by 2050?
Well, the first thing is that PwC has, I think, amongst the many things they get right, this is what they've got right. I was not going to say amongst a few things. I said amongst the many things they get right, this is one of the few things. India is heading towards the second largest economy. Now, what does that mean? How does that happen? Does it happen by natural resources? Does it happen by global policy? Does it happen by internal policy? I think a country has to inherently have two things. Has to have the intellectual ability and the entrepreneurial skills to be able to reach there. India has both of them. And as I said when I was speaking the last time, that India grows despite all government policy, despite global effects. That's what India does. And I think the thinking in India today, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we considered ourselves that we will trudge along. Today, India is not the same India. You have a young generation. You have a young generation which is tremendously aspirational. You have a young generation which is educated. and
also unemployed.
also unemployed. And they are looking, that's what is there.
That's the biggest problem.
One of the biggest political challenges will be to meet that, to meet the challenges of unemployment, skilled unemployment, and also unskilled unemployment. That is priority. Agriculture is one, and unemployment is the other. That this huge numbers we got of unemployed youth,
Yes.
They are going to be the driving force of government policy.
Sure.
They are going to be the driving force of the private
Yeah,
sector.
yeah. Tarek had a point, and then I'll come to you next. Yes, go ahead.
So I think it's very difficult to talk about inclusiveness without talking about the complexity and how complexity impacts different sectors of the economy. If you look, I think large businesses, if you're trying to answer the question, I think in a really helpful way, I think large businesses can navigate complexity. And it's the SMEs that are disproportionately impacted by that complexity. So I think the way you ensure that this growth and this growth dividend is inclusive is by basically improving the business environment and making sure that the playing field is level.
Yeah.
And I think if we're able to focus from the lens of a small and medium-sized enterprise, I think you get to where you want to go.